You need to provide identification immediately. You're standing in my backyard. Someone reported suspicious behavior around this property. Suspicious behavior? I'm grilling burgers for my daughter's birthday. How is that suspicious? Just hand over your ID and we can sort everything out.
At precisely 2:15 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in suburban Atlanta, what should have been a little girl's 7th birthday celebration quickly became a legal disaster that would uncover a pattern of harassment lasting 5 years and one officer's career, and prove that sometimes a simple backyard barbecue can cost a police department more than an entire year of overtime funding. This wasn't simply another clip showing police overstepping authority. This involved a decorated combat veteran with security clearance confronting an officer who believed a badge allowed him to step onto private property and request identification. What followed would stun an entire neighborhood and prove that understanding your rights matters, even when you're holding a grill spatula. Before we continue, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And press that subscribe button because this story takes twists you won't expect. And I don't want you to miss what happens afterward. James Mitchell was 38 years old and appeared exactly like what he was. A man who had spent 12 years serving in the United States Marine Corps. He stood 6 feet 2 inches with the kind of posture built from years of military discipline. His haircut was high and tight. His movements were deliberate and steady, even while dressed casually, grilling hamburgers behind his house. He carried that unmistakable presence of someone who had served. But James wasn't simply another veteran. He had completed 3 deployments in Afghanistan working as an intelligence analyst holding top-secret clearance. He had coordinated missions that protected American soldiers. He had collaborated directly with Defense Intelligence Agency personnel on classified operations that would never be publicly revealed. He had earned the Bronze Star and 2 Army Commendation Medals for his service. After leaving the Marines, James transitioned into civilian intelligence employment. He was currently working for a defense contractor performing threat evaluation and analysis for the Department of Defense. His security clearance remained active. His background investigations were more detailed than most people could imagine. The government had reviewed every part of his life, his finances, his connections, his travel history, everything. They had concluded he was reliable enough to access some of the nation's most guarded secrets. James lived in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta called Brookhaven. It was a pleasant neighborhood, tidy homes, strong schools, the kind of place where neighbors knew one another and children rode bicycles along the street. James had moved there 2 years earlier when he began his civilian position. He lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom house with a modest backyard, a wooden fence, and a gate that he always kept closed. On this particular Saturday in June, James was celebrating his daughter Kiana's 7th birthday. He had invited about 15 children from her school along with their parents. The backyard was decorated with purple and pink streamers because those were Kiana's favorite colors. There was a rented bounce house set up on the lawn, a table with gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Another table with juice boxes and cupcakes arranged on purple plates. James was handling the grill, preparing hamburgers and hot dogs for the kids and their parents. The party had begun at 1 p.m. Everything had been going perfectly. Kids were laughing and playing. Parents were talking and watching their children. James' wife, Nicole, was inside the house slicing the birthday cake. The weather was beautiful, not too hot, a gentle breeze, ideal party weather. James had just turned a row of burgers when he noticed a police officer step through his back gate without knocking, without identifying himself, without any warning whatsoever. The officer was Sergeant David Torres, a 14-year veteran of the Brookhaven Police Department. David was 42 years old, Latino, with a strong build and the confident stride of someone accustomed to authority. He had worked in this neighborhood for 8 years. He knew these streets. He believed he knew who belonged and who didn't. David walked straight toward James standing at the grill. No greeting, no smile, only an immediate demand. "You need to show me some ID right now." James stared at him, spatula still in hand. Genuinely confused. "I'm standing in my backyard. You came through my gate without permission." "Someone reported suspicious behavior around this neighborhood," David replied, his hand resting on his duty belt in that relaxed yet intimidating posture officers often use. "Suspicious behavior?" James motioned around the yard, toward the bounce house. "The kids playing, the party decorations. I'm grilling burgers for my daughter's birthday celebration. Just show me your ID and we can straighten this out," David said. This is the moment when most people probably would have simply complied. Grabbed their wallet, presented their ID, hoping the situation would disappear quickly so the party could continue. Most people don't want drama during their children's birthday party. James Mitchell wasn't most people. I don't have to provide identification, James said evenly. I'm on my own property. You entered without a warrant and without my consent, so I'm going to need you to leave. The parents who had been standing nearby had fallen silent. They were watching now. The children were still playing, unaware of what was happening, but every adult in that backyard was focused on the confrontation unfolding near the grill. David's expression tightened. Sir, I'm responding to a call. I need to confirm your identity. You're not responding to anything. You walked onto my property without probable cause. I'm asking you to leave. You're being difficult, David said. That could be considered obstruction. James placed the spatula down carefully. His voice remained steady, but gained an edge. I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran with active top secret security clearance. I work for a DoD contractor. I own this house. My name appears on the deed. My daughter's 7th birthday party is happening right now. And you walked onto my property without lawful justification. So no, I'm not being difficult. I'm exercising my Fourth Amendment rights. Quick question for you watching. If an officer walked into your backyard during a family party, what would you do? Type your answer in the comments. David wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially not in this neighborhood. Especially not by someone who actually understood their rights and could cite them accurately. I received a call about suspicious individuals nearby, David repeated, as though repeating it might make it sound more convincing. Suspicious individuals, James said. Or suspicious-looking individuals. There was a long pause. The kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they've walked straight into a trap, but can't figure out how to escape it. What's that supposed to mean? David asked. It means I'd like to know exactly what was suspicious. Was someone breaking into vehicles, threatening residents, or were they simply existing while black in a neighborhood where someone decided that looked suspicious? David's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate what you're suggesting. And I don't appreciate being harassed at my daughter's birthday celebration. James replied, You still haven't provided a lawful reason for standing on my property. So I'm telling you again, leave. One of the parents, a white woman named Sarah who lived 3 houses away, stepped forward. Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is James. He lives here. This is his home. David glanced at her, then back at James. Ma'am, I'm handling this. There's nothing to handle, Sarah said. He's literally grilling at his own daughter's birthday party. Another parent, a black man named Marcus, whom James had met at a school event, pulled out his phone as well, creating a backup recording. David noticed immediately. Sir, you need to put that phone away, David said. No, I don't, Marcus answered. I have every right to record a police officer performing their public duties. And besides, your own body camera is already recording all of this. David looked around the backyard. He was outnumbered now, not physically, but in every other way that mattered. There were witnesses. There was video recording. There were people who knew James and could confirm he lived there. The entire foundation of the stop was collapsing, but instead of backing down, David doubled down. I'm going to need everyone to step back and let me do my job, David said, his voice rising slightly. Your job doesn't include trespassing on private property, James said. You have no warrant. You have no exigent circumstances. You have no consent from the property owner. Every second you remain here is a violation of my constitutional rights. David's hand moved toward his handcuffs. Sir, if you continue to interfere with this investigation. What investigation? James interrupted. You walked onto my property. You demanded identification. I refused. You've established no legal basis for any of this. Now you're threatening me with arrest for asserting my rights. All of this is being recorded. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave my property. The children had started noticing something was wrong. Kiana, the birthday girl wearing her purple dress and matching headband, walked up to her father. Daddy, what's happening? She asked softly. James looked down at his daughter, and something in his expression shifted. It went from firm to furious in a heartbeat, but his voice stayed controlled. Nothing, sweetheart. This officer was just leaving. He looked straight at David. Weren't you, Sergeant? David looked at the increasing number of people observing him, at the phones recording, at the birthday girl standing beside her father, at the decorated backyard and the food sizzling on the grill. He had backed himself into a corner, and he knew it. I'm going to verify the call that came in, David said, attempting to save face. You can do that from outside my property. David turned and walked back through the gate, But as he left, he said something loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I was just doing my job." Some people turn everything into race. Do you think the officer's comment at the end made things worse for him? Type yes or no below. The celebration continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The parents were upset. The kids were confused. James tried to get things moving again, but everyone knew something wrong had just occurred. Nicole stepped outside carrying the cake and noticed the looks on everyone's faces. "What happened?" she asked. James explained. Nicole's expression shifted from confusion to shock to anger in about 10 seconds. "He just walked into our backyard," she said. "No warrant, no permission, no lawful reason," James confirmed. Marcus, who had recorded the entire encounter, approached James. "I captured everything on video. Do you want me to send it to you?" "Absolutely," James said. "And I'm going to need everyone who saw this to provide me a written statement. What happened here isn't acceptable." 6 parents remained after the party ended. They sat at the picnic table and wrote down exactly what they saw and heard. Sarah described how the officer entered the property without invitation. Marcus described the demands for identification. Another parent described the threatening body language when James refused. Another mentioned that the officer never once referenced a specific crime or complaint. James collected all 6 statements. He also requested a copy of Marcus' backup phone video. But the most important piece of evidence had already been secured. The officer's own body camera had recorded everything. Then he spent the rest of the weekend researching Georgia law on trespassing, unlawful detention, and Fourth Amendment violations on private property. By Monday morning, James had prepared a formal complaint. It wasn't a simple form. It was a detailed narrative with supporting documentation, witness statements, video evidence, and citations to relevant case law and police policies. He submitted it to the Brookhaven Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. He also sent copies to the City Council, the Mayor's Office, and the local NAACP chapter. The police department received the complaint on Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, David Torres had been called in for an interview with Internal Affairs. The investigator assigned to the case was a lieutenant named Robert Chin. Robert had been with the department for 19 years and had investigated hundreds of complaints. He had seen everything from minor policy violations to serious criminal misconduct. But when he reviewed James' complaint and watched the body camera footage, he knew this was bad. Really bad. The body camera footage showed everything from David's perspective. It showed him walking through the gate without knocking or announcing himself. It showed the birthday party taking place. It captured David's voice demanding identification without providing any legal justification. It recorded James calmly explaining his rights. It captured the threatening tone when David mentioned handcuffs. Most damaging of all, it showed a decorated veteran being harassed at his daughter's birthday party. All recorded by the officer's own equipment. Robert pulled David's personnel file. He examined the complaint history. What he found was troubling. Over the previous 5 years, David had received 23 complaints. Most had been labeled as unfounded or unsubstantiated, but when Robert looked at them carefully, he saw a pattern. 18 of the 23 complaints involved black residents. 12 of those specifically mentioned David entering property without permission or demanding identification without cause. 7 mentioned accusations of racial profiling. 5 mentioned threatening language or behavior. Every single complaint had been investigated by the same supervisor, a sergeant named Mike Williams, who was David's friend and former patrol partner. Mike had found no wrongdoing in any of the cases. Robert expanded his investigation. He pulled David's dispatch records for the past 3 years. He reviewed the calls David had responded to and the actions he had taken. The data was damaging. David had initiated 347, what he called suspicious person investigations, in the past 3 years. 261 of those involved black individuals or families. That was 75%. In a patrol area where the black population was 32%, David's average response time to calls in mostly black neighborhoods was 23 minutes. His average response time in mostly white neighborhoods was 11 minutes. He had made 89 arrests in the past 3 years. 67 of those arrests were of black individuals. 41 of those arrests were for minor offenses like disorderly conduct, loitering, or obstruction charges that gave officers a lot of discretion. The pattern was unmistakable. David Torres wasn't just a cop who made a mistake. He was an officer with a documented record of discriminatory policing that the department had failed to confront. Robert's investigation report was 37 pages long. It contained statistical analysis of David's patrol activity, a review of all earlier complaints, interviews with witnesses from the birthday party event, evaluation of the video evidence, and a comparison of David's enforcement behavior with other officers assigned to similar duties. The conclusion was unmistakable. David had violated department policy regarding constitutional policing. He had entered private property without lawful justification. He had demanded identification without reasonable suspicion. He had threatened arrest in retaliation for a citizen asserting their rights, and he had a sustained pattern of discriminatory enforcement that the department had ignored. The recommendation was termination. The police chief read the report and called a meeting with the city attorney. They both understood what was coming. A lawsuit, a significant one, from a sympathetic plaintiff with video proof and a documented pattern to reference. The city attorney advised immediate damage control. Terminate the officer. Publicly acknowledge the violation. Contact the victim about potential settlement before the lawsuit gets filed. 3 weeks after the birthday party incident, David Torres was terminated from the Brookhaven Police Department. The termination letter cited multiple policy violations and a pattern of behavior inconsistent with constitutional policing. David attempted to challenge it. His police union filed a grievance. They argued that he was being made a scapegoat for political reasons, that the investigation was biased, that other officers did similar things and weren't being punished. The arbitration hearing lasted 2 days. The arbitrator reviewed all the evidence, the statistical analysis, the witness statements, the body camera footage that David's own equipment had captured, the pattern of complaints. The arbitrator upheld the termination. In his written decision, he noted that the body camera footage alone was sufficient to justify termination, specifically pointing out the irony that the officer's own required equipment had documented his constitutional violations so thoroughly. The pattern of discriminatory conduct made the decision obvious. David's law enforcement career was finished. But James wasn't satisfied with just the termination. He wanted accountability beyond one officer losing his job. He wanted to know why 23 complaints over 5 years had been ignored. He wanted to know who had failed to supervise David. He wanted systemic reform. James hired a civil rights attorney. Together, they filed a federal lawsuit against David Torres individually, against Sergeant Mike Williams for failing to properly investigate complaints, against the Brookhaven Police Department for failure to supervise and train, and against the city of Brookhaven for maintaining policies that allowed discriminatory policing. The lawsuit alleged violations of the Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment, and Georgia state constitution. It sought compensatory damages for emotional distress, punitive damages to punish the conduct, and injunctive relief requiring policy reforms. The complaint was filed in the Northern District of Georgia. It was 52 pages long and included exhibits that filled another 200 pages. Statistical analysis, video evidence, witness statements, the internal affairs report, David's personnel file, everything. The city's attorneys reviewed the case and gave the same advice every attorney gives when the evidence is this bad. Settle. The negotiations took 4 months. James' attorney pushed firmly, not just on the money but on the reforms. The final settlement included $480,000 in compensation to James and his family. More importantly, it required the Brookhaven Police Department to implement a bias-free policing policy with real enforcement. Officers found to have patterns of discriminatory enforcement would face mandatory retraining or termination. Creation of an independent review board to investigate all complaints involving allegations of discrimination or constitutional violations. No more internal investigations of serious complaints. Mandatory body cameras for all officers with footage automatically uploaded to a system that couldn't be edited or deleted by individual officers. Annual public reporting of stop data, arrest data, and complaint data broken down by race and neighborhood. Quarterly training on constitutional rights, implicit bias, and community policing for all sworn officers. A requirement that officers document in writing the specific reasonable suspicion or probable cause for every investigative stop or property entry. The settlement was announced at a city council meeting. The mayor issued a public apology to James and his family. Several council members spoke about the need for police accountability and transparency. The local news covered the story extensively. The body camera footage was broadcast and shared widely on social media. People were outraged that a veteran had been harassed at his daughter's birthday party. and even more outraged that it was all captured on the officer's own body camera. Outraged that complaints had been ignored for years. Outraged that it took a lawsuit to force change. James gave one interview to the local NBC affiliate. He was calm and measured in his comments. He said he didn't take any pleasure in what happened, but that accountability was necessary. He said he hoped the policy changes would protect other families from similar experiences. He said, "Knowing your rights mattered, but so did demanding that institutions respect those rights." The video went viral. It spread across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. News outlets across the country picked it up. The story made it to CNN and MSNBC. Legal commentators analyzed it. Civil rights organizations cited it as an example of why police reform was needed. Training Academy showed it to new officers as an example of what not to do. One video recorded on a parent's phone at a 7-year-old's birthday party had become a national conversation about policing, property rights, and accountability. Type facts in the comments if you think more officers need to face real consequences like this. David Torres never worked in law enforcement again. No department would hire him after a termination for discriminatory policing. He moved out of state and took a job in private security, though that didn't last long either. Once employers learned about his background, he gave one interview to a conservative podcast where he claimed he was the victim of cancel culture and political correctness. He said he was just doing his job and that people were too sensitive. He never acknowledged that walking onto someone's private property without cause was a constitutional violation. He never apologized to James or his family. But his opinion didn't matter. The facts were documented. The video existed. The investigation was thorough and public. The settlement was a matter of court record. Sergeant Mike Williams, who had buried 23 complaints against David, was demoted back to patrol officer and placed on a performance improvement plan. He retired 6 months later rather than face additional scrutiny. The Brookhaven Police Department implemented all the required reforms. The Independent Review Board started operating. Body cameras became mandatory. The bias-free policing policy went into effect. The first year of public data reporting showed changes. Stops of black residents decreased by 31%, while overall stops remained steady, suggesting officers were being more judicious about who they stopped and why. Complaints about discriminatory treatment dropped by 44%. The Independent Review Board sustained 12 complaints in its first year, compared to 0 sustained complaints in the previous 3 years under internal investigation. The changes weren't perfect. Some officers resented the oversight. Some community members said the reforms didn't go far enough, but they were measurable improvements, and they happened because one veteran refused to accept being harassed in his own backyard. James and his family still live in Brookhaven. Kiana is now 9 years old and doesn't remember much about the incident at her 7th birthday party. Nicole says she'll tell her daughter the full story when she's older, when she can understand what it means to stand up for your rights, even when it's uncomfortable. James continued his work as a defense contractor. The incident didn't affect his security clearance. If anything, the way he handled the situation, calm, legally precise, documented, showed exactly the kind of judgment that intelligence work requires. He occasionally speaks at community meetings about the importance of knowing your rights and holding police accountable. He's not an activist or an organizer. He's just a veteran who believes that the rights he fought for overseas should mean something at home. The birthday party video is still online. You can watch the whole thing recorded from the officer's own body camera. You can see an officer walk onto private property without justification. You can see a veteran calmly assert his constitutional rights. You can see witnesses recording and supporting their neighbor. You can see what accountability looks like when people refuse to accept injustice. All documented by the very equipment meant to protect officers from false accusations. Final question for you. Do you think all police departments should be required to have independent review boards for complaints? Let me know in the comments. This story matters because it shows that police misconduct isn't always about violence. Sometimes it's about harassment, about demands for identification, about treating people as suspicious simply for existing in certain spaces. James didn't get shot. He didn't get beaten. He didn't even get arrested. But his rights were still violated. His family was still traumatized. His daughter's birthday was still disrupted. And because he knew his rights, because he documented everything, because he followed through with complaints and legal action, the violation had consequences. That's the lesson here. Not every interaction with police is life-threatening. But every violation of rights matters. Every instance of discriminatory policing damages communities. Every time an officer faces no consequences for misconduct, it encourages more misconduct. James' case shows that ordinary people can hold powerful institutions accountable. You don't have to be a lawyer or a law professor. You just have to know your rights. Stand firm, document everything, and follow through. And sometimes the best documentation comes from the officer's own equipment. The body camera footage, the witness statements, the complaint documentation, the lawsuit, the settlement, the policy changes. All of it started because one veteran refused to show identification in his own backyard. And the officer's own body camera captured every second of the constitutional violation. One cookout, one confrontation, 14 years of an officer's career ended, $480,000 paid out, systemic policy changes implemented, and thousands of people educated about their Fourth Amendment rights. That's the power of standing up. That's the importance of accountability. That's what happens when someone knows their rights and refuses to back down, even when it would be easier to just comply. Thanks for watching this story to the end. If this opened your eyes to something you didn't know, make sure you're subscribed for more stories that matter. Drop a comment about what you would have done in James' position, and share this with someone who needs to know their rights. I'll see you in the next one.